There was a time when it was believed that in order to be worthy of God's love, a person had to perfect themselves to the point of having no flaws, to prove themselves absolutely moral, obedient, and humble. Years passed, and many devoted themselves tirelessly to that path seemingly noble, yet in truth only a wearying spiral. Not because God demanded such a thing, but because humanity had never truly understood him. When people set conditions for themselves in order to be loved, they unintentionally deny the sacred essence already present within. And it is this very denial that prevents them from experiencing the infinite power God has already placed inside every soul. Many are searching for the divine as if it were a treasure hidden at the farthest reaches of the universe. They pray, they hope, they kneel in nights of despair, waiting for a miracle from the outside. But if there is something that makes their prayers seem unanswered, it is not because God is absent, but because they are praying from a consciousness of separation. They believe God is distant, listening from some high realm, and that they must say enough words, do enough deeds, endure enough suffering to gain his favor. The truth is entirely different. Every journey of seeking the sacred leads to the same place. It is not found outside, but within. Not at the end of the road, but at the very beginning. Not in a distant realm reached after a lifetime of striving, but in the present moment, right where you are. The kingdom of God is not some far-off promised land, but a state of consciousness you can touch now. It is not built of bricks or conditions, but of awareness. And the key is not supplication, but remembrance. Spiritual awakening does not come from academic theories or elaborate rituals. It arrives when a person, in the midst of desperate attempts to find strength outside, suddenly pauses and listens within. It comes like a gentle breeze across the desert, like a slender beam of light piercing heavy darkness. And then you realize, you do not need to become someone else to be loved. You do not need perfection to touch the divine, because you are already a part of it. Your true essence is not the fears, the mistakes, or the limitations you were taught to believe in. Your true essence is sacred, whole, and filled with creative power. When you touch this truth, there is no need to cry out for a miracle, for you yourself are where the miracle begins. There is no need to strive to reach God, because the very consciousness with which you think of him is already his living expression within you. It is not that you are unheard, it is that you are speaking a language divine consciousness does not use. While you speak of lack, of fear, of what is not yet, the subconscious quietly records that feeling as a command, and then it does what it does best. It faithfully creates more experiences of the same. The astonishing truth is that you are always heard, but the answer reflects the beliefs embedded within you, not the words upon your lips. Thus, the journey of seeking is not about finding something new, but about removing layers of forgetfulness, peeling away each false belief that you need to be accepted, that you must become worthy, that you must suffer enough to be loved. These are clouds. The light has always been there. No one needs to relight the sun, only to draw the curtains of cloud aside. The sacred within you is not conditioned by life's circumstances, by the past, or by any judgment from the outside. It exists as a continuous flow, unbroken, unceasing. When you truly grasp this, you stop searching for love outside and begin to radiate it from within. You are no longer a beggar for peace, but the very source of peace. No longer asking, "Am I worthy yet?" but living as one who knows they have always been worthy. This is not arrogance. This is awakening. When you see yourself through divine eyes, you begin to see others in the same way, and the world begins to change not through politics or systems, but through people who know who they are. You do not need to go anywhere to find God. You only need to step back from the noise in your mind, from the old beliefs, from the barriers in your heart. And then, in the stillness, you will hear. Not with ears, but with your whole being. A presence, a knowing, a sense beyond words, yet unmistakable. This is him, and he is not far away. He is you, living through you, thinking through you, loving through you. From that moment on, every prayer is no longer a plea, but an affirmation. Every action is no longer driven by fear, but by love. Every choice is no longer forced, but a natural unfolding of the soul. And each day becomes an offering of gratitude, not because everything is perfect, but because you have remembered who you are. In every breath, every thought, Every awakened moment, you are returning, not to a place, but to your true essence. And there, no conditions remain. Only light, only wholeness, only you and the Most High as one. There is a kind of pain unseen, without a medical name, and not understood by any ordinary measure. It is the feeling of being forgotten by God. It is when you pray, but hear only silence. When you look toward the heavens, but see only emptiness. When you strive to live well, to be kind, to keep faith, yet everything you long for from Him, love, healing, miracles, still does not come. And then, amidst the string of disappointments, you begin to ask yourself, perhaps I am not good enough, perhaps I am not worthy of being loved. That feeling is not rare. It creeps into the human heart like a quiet but persistent shadow, not loud, not dramatic, but eroding. It makes you act as though you must do something to gain God's attention, as though you must sacrifice, strive, perfect yourself in order to be seen by Him. Many have lived their entire lives in that state, in a sacred relationship where they believe they are always lesser, further, lacking. The sense of unworthiness is born from a false belief handed down through generations that God only loves those who meet the standard, that He draws near only to those who have passed enough trials, that He blesses only those moral enough, obedient enough, pure enough in soul. Such a belief has turned God's love into a reward instead of a nature. And when love is viewed as something to be achieved, life becomes an endless contest, one in which you are never certain you are doing enough. From that point, prayer ceases to be an intimate conversation with the source of life and becomes instead a list of faults, a set of promises to fix, commitments to change in hope of acceptance. You beg Him to listen, but perhaps what you need is not for Him to listen, but for you to stop condemning yourself. God has never loved you conditionally. The sacred does not require you to meet a standard before you are allowed to enter. He is not distant that you must climb upward, not above that you must bow low. He is right at the center of life, beating within your chest, and from the moment you were born, you have been loved, not because of anything you did, but because of who you are. The doubt of worthiness clouds the vision of the sacred. It makes you see yourself as a lost soul needing salvation, instead of a sacred spark needing only to remember its own light. It makes you ask, am I worthy of receiving good things? When the real question should be, why do I believe I am not? Nothing separates you from God except the belief that you are separated, and nothing weakens the flow of goodness except fear, guilt, self-doubt. The subconscious does not understand reasoning. It understands only the image you hold of yourself. If that image is of one unworthy, the subconscious will operate to recreate circumstances that match that belief. Not because you are being punished, but because you are the one programming the result for yourself. Many mistake their suffering as a sign of God's anger. They think failure is a sign of rejection, illness, a punishment for past mistakes. But the truth is that the world does not function according to human reward and punishment. It functions by the frequency of consciousness. And restoration begins not with action, but with an awareness. I have never been cut off from God. I only forgot. When you feel distant, you do not need to strive to come closer. Remember the closeness that has always been. When you feel unloved, you do not need to chase love. Open yourself to the love already present. When you feel unworthy, do not try to prove the opposite. Let go of that false idea. No one needs to convince the sun to shine. No one needs to persuade God to love. You do not need to beg for what is already yours. You do not need to summon what is always present. What you need is only to shift from asking to receiving, from can I to I already carry, from I am not enough to I have always been complete. The sense of worthiness does not come from the outside. It is not the result of praise or success or the acceptance of others. It comes from within, from the harmony between the soul and divine truth. When you agree with the truth that you are unconditionally loved, you need no further proof to live in that love. God did not create children who must prove their value. He created expressions of Himself to live, to create, to experience love in countless forms. You are not here to become someone else. You are here to embody the deepest truth. You are the sacred life manifesting in human form. The feeling of unworthiness is not the truth. It is a cloud, and a single ray of awareness is enough to pierce that darkness. When you begin to live as one who has already been chosen, already loved, already empowered you, do not just change your mind, you change reality. For the universe always reflects the consciousness you hold within. Let go of the old questions. Have I done enough? Am I right enough? Am I worthy enough? And replace them with a new affirmation. I am one who carries the light of God within me. I am always worthy. I am loved in this very presence. The moment you believe this, the universe begins to move to affirm it in every possible way. And every feeling of distance will vanish, not because you have come closer to God, but because you have abandoned the belief that He was ever far away. There is a saying that has passed through thousands of years of history, still holding the same liberating power as the first day it was spoken. The kingdom of God is within you, not in the heavens above, not at the end of the road of asceticism, not hidden in dogma or elaborate rituals, but right here, within you, in this breath, in this moment. This is not a religious proclamation. It is the map of the soul, a gentle yet radical reminder that every search outside is only the echo of something that has always been within. If that kingdom is already within us, why do so many still live as if they are excluded from divine grace? Because they have not yet recognized it. Because the mind has been veiled by so many layers of false beliefs that the divine is a privilege reserved for a select few, that only through intermediaries can one reach God, that external perfection is the condition to enter holy ground. But the truth requires no conditions, and the sacred demands no special access. It only needs to be recognized. You do not need to make that kingdom appear. You only need to remove the veil that keeps you from seeing it. When the mind is crowded with fear, with anxiety, with guilt, the kingdom is still there, but like a sun hidden behind clouds. The light has never left. It only waits for you to clear the sky. The kingdom of God is the place where there is no distance between you and life itself, where you need no permission to be loved, no proof to be healed, where every good thing is no longer a distant reward, but a given reality. When you enter that state of consciousness, you do not merely feel peace, you become peace itself. You do not only receive the light, you become the bearer of the light, no longer a seeker, but an awakened one. The central truth is not some mystical knowledge beyond reach, but a profound simplicity. You are where God is living, loving, creating. The divine presence is not in some faraway realm, but beating in your heart, breathing through you, observing life through your very eyes. When you understand this, not with your mind, but with your whole soul, every effort to seek dissolves, replaced by complete presence. Many have lived decades without ever truly turning inward. They fill their lives with activity, with relationships, with prayers full of worry, yet still feel empty. Not because they lack anything, but because they have never paused long enough to hear the silent call within. That kingdom does not come with thunder, but with stillness. Not with conquest, but with surrender in love. Not with striving, but with letting go. You do not need to wait until you are spiritually mature to step in. You have always been there, like a drop of water never separated from the ocean, like a flame never apart from the candle. The truth is this: you have always been in that kingdom, you simply did not know where you stood. From the moment you realize this, every old rule is released. No longer the feeling of, I must try to be good enough, but rather, I am living from the goodness already within me. No longer the sense of begging for intervention, but instead, I am walking with God in every breath. You are not moving from abandonment to being loved. You only need to release the illusion that you were ever abandoned, and love will rush in like a tide that has always been waiting. That kingdom is not only for sacred moments, it is present in the most ordinary things. When you wash your hands, when you listen, when you forgive, when you smile at a stranger, when you look into someone's eyes and see yourself in them. Because the kingdom of God is not found in a place, but in a state of deep connection, of unconditional presence, of love without distinction. When you carry that consciousness into the world, you are no longer bound by circumstances. You are no longer swayed by emotions manipulated from outside. You begin to live from the inside out, where every decision, every response, every step bears the mark of profound wisdom. That is when you are no longer driven by fear, but guided by light. No longer conditioned by the world, but becoming one who adjusts the frequency of the world around you. The greatest truth is not something far away, but something so close we often forget. You do not need anything more to be sacred. You only need to recognize the sacred already living within you. That kingdom does not come from promises, does not wait in the future, does not depend on anyone. It is unfolding right now in this moment where you are listening, feeling, being. And if there is anything that must be remembered, it is this: you have never left that place. Every time you choose love over fear, you take a step into the kingdom. Every time you forgive instead of holding resentment, you are living from the center of the sacred. Every time you speak truth, live sincerely, trust in goodness, you are living as one who knows. The kingdom of God is within. No need for exaltation, no need to withdraw from the world. Only presence, deep, complete, authentic. And in that presence, you will hear a voice without words, speaking to you through the very vibration in your heart. You are home. Imagine a man wandering the crowded marketplace, surviving each day on scraps of bread, curling up each night in the cold corners of the city. He walks past solid stone walls, past an iron gate rusted with time, never realizing that just beyond it stands an ancient mansion that bears his name. No one has driven him out. No one has taken it away. He has simply forgotten that he once had the key, forgotten that he once grew up in the rose garden of that estate. And as memory faded with time, he began to believe he was only an outsider. He gave himself names: the abandoned, the unworthy, the unwanted. Yet the truth remained. The mansion still lit its lamps each night, still had caretakers to keep it clean, still had the fireplace burning warm, and still had its door open, waiting for him to return. But once one forgets their origin, even paradise feels foreign. That story is not merely a metaphor. It is the very condition of countless people living today. Noble souls, carrying within themselves the sacred inheritance of the universe, yet mistaking themselves for exiles. They live within self-imposed limitations, accept small fates, believe in labels society has placed upon them, unaware that they are refusing their own sacred inheritance, the right to live in light, in freedom, in profound peace. You need not do anything to deserve that mansion, because it has always belonged to you. Just as the sun does not require payment to shine, just as the air does not demand proof to be breathed, the sacred love of the universe is unconditional. But it requires one thing: that you remember. Remember that you were not born into lack, but into fullness, not created to endure, but to express the beauty of God Himself in human form. And that memory does not rest in the mind. It lies deep within consciousness, like an ancient resonance still echoing. You once knew who you were. Before judgment veiled you, before wounds were inflicted, before you were taught that you must strive to be loved, you once knew. That is why at times in stillness you feel a nameless longing, a sense that, I have forgotten something vital. That is the invitation to return. Returning does not mean becoming someone else. It means stopping, laying down the masks, and stepping through the gate that has always been open. When you do this, you not only find abundance, you rediscover your essence. And then, the outer world begins to change. Not because you are trying to control it, but because you are living from a different position, the position of the heir. An heir does not beg, they do not feel shame, they do not need anyone to affirm their value. They walk with gratitude. They treat others with generosity. They do not compete, for they know no one can take their portion. They do not fear lack, for they are connected to an infinite source. And in their eyes you will see something beyond words, a presence that makes others remember they too are heirs. The truth is, no one is excluded from that mansion. There is only forgetting, only false belief. But the good news is this: every belief can be changed, every memory can be stirred, every gate can be entered so long as you are willing. No struggle is needed, only sincerity. No striving, only openness. For reality does not reflect what you deserve, but what you agree to in consciousness. If you believe you are an outsider, reality will confirm it. But if you dare to look directly at the sacred truth within, that you were born of light, that you are a part of universal consciousness, that you have the right to love and be loved, then the walls of limitation will begin to crack, not by miracles from outside, but by transformation from within. And the mansion ceases to be a symbol, becoming instead a living experience each day. Peace, clarity, abundance. Do not wait until life collapses to return. The door is still open, and the universe has never been angry with you. It is patient. It does not blame you for forgetting. It only waits, like the father waiting for the wandering child to return in the ancient story. And when you step inside, you will not be judged. You will be embraced. For the only thing light ever needed was to be recognized by you. So if you find yourself standing outside, remember that you have never truly left. You need only stop, breathe deeply, and say in silence, "I remember now. I am ready to return." From that moment on, you are no longer the seeker. You are the one who is found. And the whole universe will resound with the harmony of your homecoming. On a heavy rainy night in 1952, when the entire city seemed drowned in gloom and despair, a man walked aimlessly through the dark, rain-soaked streets. The streetlights cast faint reflections on the water-streaked pavement, but in his mind, everything was darker than the night sky. He had nothing left, no money, no reputation, no direction, and more than anything else, he was depleted of faith. Every effort before had failed. His prayers were nothing more than hopeless echoes in his head, as if he were speaking into a cold void. He had read books, tried methods, spoken of hope, but now, even he no longer believed in what he once taught. The feeling of being abandoned, of God turning his face away, left him as if falling freely into the emptiness of life. And then, in that moment of absolute loneliness, he stopped in the rain. No more pleas, no more expectation of miracles, no more resistance. He stood there, drenched, and said to himself, "If this is the end, I accept. I will run no longer." It was not surrender in despair, but a complete release, a stripping away of every spiritual disguise, an opening of the final door he had long kept locked. And in that strange silence, something happened. Not thunder, nor a miraculous beam of light from the heavens, but a sensation, light as breath, a presence, a touch without form, yet one that stilled his heart with a peace he had never known. No voice spoke aloud, but his whole soul understood. He had never been abandoned, and he had never truly been alone. What he had long awaited did not come from outside. It came from within. Not because he had begged enough, but because he had stopped resisting. He no longer tried to control, no longer set conditions, no longer dictated how the miracle must arrive. It was the letting go that opened the divine flow, and that flow had never ceased. He had simply turned away from it. From that night, everything began to change, not in the sense of waking up to find life suddenly perfect, but in a series of subtle, steady, profound movements. His mind became clear. Ideas came with clarity. Supportive people began to appear. Doors once shut slowly opened, and above all, he was no longer afraid. Not because he knew every answer, but because he knew he was connected. This story is not meant to glorify one man. It is not about a name or a specific circumstance. It is a symbol of what happens when a soul dares to lay down the doubting self, to step into the sacred space of absolute trust. When you stop trying to control everything, you allow what is greater than you to move. When you stop running from truth, you allow light to enter. The moment of surrender is not defeat. It is the beginning of power. For as long as you believe you must strain to turn the world, you are still playing the role of the separate one. But when you realize that the river does not need to be pushed to flow, the light does not need to shout to shine, then you understand, presence is enough. You do not need to conquer life. You need to be truly present in it. In the story of 1952, the miracle did not come through frantic repetition of words in panic. It came through deep acceptance that everything was already prepared, only waiting for consciousness to allow it. And this is exactly what you can do now. You do not need to wait until everything collapses. You do not need to walk empty-handed in the cold rain. You only need to stop, be still, and say with complete sincerity, "I will not control anymore. I am ready to see the divine." From that moment, what changes is not the outside world, but the way you step into it. No longer stepping in fear, but in faith. No longer fleeing, but returning. No longer one who strives to attain something, but one who lives in harmony with what has always been present. And when you live this way, you become a living testimony for others. You do not need to preach. You only need to be. For true light is never loud. It simply shines. And that shining alone leaves no space for darkness. The story of 1952 happened, yet its message still resounds in every soul. You have not been abandoned. You do not need to do anything to be worthy. You only need to remember. And when you let go, what has always been waiting will appear. Not because you begged, but because you stopped doubting. Prayer is not the desperate knocking on a closed gate. It is the return to a door that has always been open, though the one who approaches it is blinded by fear. Prayer is not meant to change the will of God, but to clarify the perception of man. And true transformation in life begins with transformation in the way we pray. Almost everyone has prayed in times of distress. The sense of helplessness drives them to call upon a greater force, hoping that their pleading might stir the mercy of heaven. But the more they pray, the more distant they feel. The more they cry out, the more the door seems shut, because they are praying from a place of lack, from the posture of an outsider, unworthy, unheard. This way of praying is called petition. It arises from a false assumption that God is withholding goodness, and that we must beg in order to receive it. But the truth is this: nothing is being withheld. No power is refusing. The separation is not above, it is within. And as long as our consciousness believes itself to be lacking, even the most beautiful prayers will only echo that belief in lack. Transformation occurs when a person steps out of the state of petition and into the state of recognition. This is the deeper level of prayer, not directed outward, but inward. Not the act of someone in need of help, but the awakening of someone who already possesses all. At this level, prayer becomes recognition, not the recognition of a doctrine, but the inner certainty that what we seek has always been present, and our consciousness is aligning with it. Petition says, "Please grant me healing." Recognition says, "I affirm that wholeness already exists within me." Petition says, "Please help me overcome this difficulty." Recognition says, "I am part of divine wisdom, and every path is already open." The difference is not in the words, but in the vibration. One sends out the frequency of fear, the other radiates the frequency of oneness with the source. When you pray from recognition, you no longer hope for a miracle, you become the miracle. You no longer wait for intervention, you become a co-creator with the divine. You no longer try to manipulate outcomes, you trust the perfect flow already at work, and you enter that flow as an inseparable part of it. Someone might ask, how can I recognize something when I am suffering, when I am unemployed, when I am sick, when I have been betrayed? But it is precisely then that recognition is needed most. Not pretending to be strong, not denying feelings, but ensuring that your consciousness is not identified with the darkness. When you are in the night, remember the existence of dawn. When surrounded by hardship, affirm the creative power within you, not because circumstances have changed, but so that you do not forget who you are in the midst of the storm. The miracle is this: when you pray from recognition, you do not need to repeat it many times. A simple affirmation, spoken once from the depth of the soul, carries more power than thousands of frantic words. For the universe does not respond to the number of times you repeat, but to the degree to which you are identified with what you say. A person may repeat hundreds of times the phrase, "I am healthy," but if their heart is full of fear, the subconscious will respond to the vibration of fear. But if that person, even once, speaks it with certainty from the soul, the subconscious receives it as an unquestionable command. That is when prayer becomes intentional creation, no longer the act of searching blindly. Try sitting quietly and saying, "I am one with infinite wisdom. I am guided step by step. I am a channel of divine light." Let each word move through you like a current. No need to force images. No need to imagine something extraordinary. Only feel that it is true. And if your mind doubts, do not resist it. Simply return, gently, and repeat the recognition like a breath. This is the art of prayer, not shouting, not wrestling with fate, but becoming as clear as a still lake, so that truth may reflect without distortion. When your heart is quiet, you will hear the whisper of God not coming from outside, but from the very center of your being. And you will realize, prayer is not the moment you reach for God, but the moment you pause long enough to see that you have never left. Just as light does not need to be summoned, only the veil of doubt needs to be lifted. From today, observe the way you pray. Listen to whether you are speaking to a distant God or conversing with the source of light within you. Let go of the sense of separation. Enter prayer not as a beggar, but as an heir. And remember, everything you truly recognize becomes reality, not by a miracle from afar, but through the transformation within you. The subconscious does not argue, it does not analyze, does not judge, does not debate. It does only one thing: it accepts everything you send into it and quietly turns it into reality. It does not ask if you are certain. It does not check whether what you say is true. It simply operates according to the vibrational command you release, and that command is your emotion. Many people assume that words are the center of creation, but what shapes reality is not the words, it is the energy that accompanies them. You may say, "I am healthy," but if your heart is full of fear, the subconscious will not hear your words. It will only hear the vibration of your worry, and it is that vibration that becomes the true command. You may say, "I am wealthy," but if the underlying feeling is lack, the subconscious will remain loyal to poverty. Picture the subconscious as fertile soil and emotion as the seed. Everything you feel deeply is planted into that soil and will bear fruit in kind. The subconscious does not care whether you plant positive or negative seeds. It does not choose. It only knows. Whatever is planted will sprout. The stronger the emotion, the larger the plant. And if you constantly water with fear, anger, or insecurity, do not be surprised when your life grows into a forest filled with worry and chaos. Many live without realizing they are the master of a powerful servant. They complain that life is unfair, that they are unlucky, that everything is against them. But the servant is not at fault. He is only carrying out the orders the master gives, whether through spoken words, actions, or repeated silent thoughts. Therefore, what matters is not what you wish for, but which emotions you are most familiar with. If you long for love but inwardly fear abandonment, the subconscious does not create connection, it multiplies fear. If you want success but constantly feel you are not good enough, the subconscious will lead you into situations that prove that belief. Not because the universe punishes you, but because the servant is carrying out the unspoken orders you send every day. This is not punishment, it is law. And because it is neutral, it is also the path to liberation. Once you understand that emotion is the directive of creation, you can begin to change from the root. You do not need to struggle with outer reality. You only need to shift the inner state. For everything outside is merely a projection reflecting the condition of the heart. Begin by observing your dominant emotions each day. What do you feel when you wake? What energy do you carry into your work? When you think of money, of health, of relationships, what are you feeling? These are the default frequencies your subconscious is receiving as operational commands. If you want to change reality, you cannot only change language, you must change the emotion behind it. Instead of saying, "I am at peace," mechanically, stop, breathe deeply, and truly feel the stillness. Instead of repeating, "I am loved," like a mantra, touch a memory, an image, a sound that makes your heart genuinely resonate. When emotion arises, the command is recorded. The subconscious does not need you to do anything complicated. It does not demand rituals, nor require perfection. It only asks for consistency. You cannot plant seeds of love in the morning, then water them with fear all day, and expect a garden of happiness. The strongest emotion, repeated most often, will prevail. And do not mistake emotion for something random. You can choose your emotions if you are aware enough. Just as you cannot control the wind, but you can adjust the sail. Emotions do not need to be suppressed or denied. They need to be guided. When you are sad, do not dismiss the sadness. Breathe with it, listen to it, then gently choose a brighter thought to transform it. Not to pretend joy, but to remember that you have the power to shape your inner state. The subconscious servant is very faithful, but also very patient. He does not demand that you change overnight. He only waits for you to begin planting new seeds: love, gratitude, trust, and to nurture them persistently. In time, those new sprouts will rise above the old weeds, and a new reality will bloom before your eyes, not as a random miracle, but as an inevitable result. Remember that everything you have ever received, whether good or bad, was the answer to what you once felt deeply. There is no injustice in the subconscious, only response. And when you learn to send out vibrations that are positive, consistent, and sincere, you will see life respond without delay. That faithful servant never sleeps. He waits for the next command. And you, in every moment, are writing the script of your life, not with your hands, but with your emotions. So write with light. Feel with life. Live as if everything you send into the subconscious is growing by the minute, because that is the truth. Margaret had prayed for 20 years. Every night before bed, she folded her hands, closed her eyes, and fervently repeated her petitions. She asked for her family's safety. She asked for health. She asked for a more stable job, for a better income. She asked for a sincere relationship, so she would not feel lonely anymore. But the more she prayed for those things, the farther away they seemed. Year after year, her prayers remained nothing more than sounds echoing into the void, until one day she stopped asking, not because she had lost faith, but because she was weary. And in that moment, something strange happened. Instead of continuing to repeat the list of what was missing, Margaret silently thought of just one small thing: thank you for this breath. And that was the beginning of a profound transformation. She did not realize that in that very moment, the moment when she asked for nothing, but simply gave thanks for something she already had, her entire vibrational frequency shifted. And for the subconscious, emotion is the only language. When you feel you already have, you broadcast the signal of sufficiency. And that faithful subconscious does not hesitate. It immediately begins to open experiences that match that signal. Margaret began to spend a few minutes each morning writing down 3 things she was grateful for. Nothing grand. A ray of sunlight through the curtain. A cup of tea still warm. A stranger's smile at an intersection. And each night, instead of pleading, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for today. Though it was not perfect, I have lived it fully." After only a few weeks, the inexplicable began to occur. An old friend unexpectedly introduced her to a new job opportunity, with a kinder environment and better income. An acquaintance from her yoga class began to show her sincere affection. Tensions in her family gradually dissolved without confrontation. But above all, Margaret no longer prayed with a sense of lack. She prayed as an act of connection, as a flowing current of gratitude for life. This was not coincidence. This was law. When you shift the frequency of prayer from pleading to gratitude, you no longer stand outside the door, knocking into the divine. You step inside, sit at the table that has always been prepared for you, and partake of life's feast as a rightful child. Gratitude is not politeness. It is the way you affirm to the subconscious that you are in the state of having, and when you have, you become a magnet for more. Margaret once asked why her earlier prayers had not been effective. The answer was found deep within her heart, because she had prayed from the position of one lacking, from worry, from fear, from the belief that she was not enough. But prayer is not a list of deficiencies for God to repair. Prayer is the tuning of your soul's frequency to harmonize with the wholeness already present. Picture it like a radio. When you are at frequency 88.3, you cannot hear the music playing at 102.7, even though that song is still being broadcast. Shifting frequency is shifting alignment, and emotion is the dial. Gratitude is one of the highest frequencies you can emit. It carries the message that you have seen, even if it is just a spark of light in the dark. And when you acknowledge that spark, you allow it to expand. Prayer is not about doing something to receive a reward. It is about becoming something to reflect truth. When you become grateful, you no longer need to beg. You are already resonating with the sacred source of life. And from there, all things are possible. Someone who heard Margaret's story once asked, "What if I have nothing to be grateful for?" The answer is always, begin with the very breath you have. Breath does not ask your permission to come. It is the first sign of life, the first gift you were given, and if you can start there, you are opening a new current. Gratitude does not require you to be content with every circumstance. It only invites you to find one point of light to rise from. When you give thanks for the small, you prove you have the ability to see grace even through a crack in the door. And the miracle is this: that crack will gradually widen, not because you force it, but because you have learned to recognize the sacred presence in what once seemed ordinary. Margaret no longer prays as she once did. She no longer writes lists of things needing repair. She begins each day with the question, "Where can I see grace today?" And by living with that question, her life itself has become an unceasing prayer. You do not need to become someone special to do what Margaret did. You only need the willingness to change from within. Instead of repeating what is missing, emphasize what is already here. Instead of asking why blessings have not come, look at how much you have already received. Instead of waiting for something big to happen to be grateful, let gratitude make the big thing possible. The frequency you emit is your strongest prayer. And gratitude is a frequency beyond words, resonating into the very depth of reality. Shift into it. Whisper your thanks even before you receive. Because gratitude does not wait for the miracle. Gratitude is the miracle. Imagine your consciousness as a radio. It does not create the music, nor generate the waves. It only receives. But the key is this: the radio can only pick up the frequency it is tuned to. If you turn the dial to static, all you hear will be noise. If you tune it correctly, the symphony will appear clear and full, without effort. And your life in every moment is the exact replica of the frequency your inner radio is receiving. There are no coincidences, no random misfortunes, no rigidly predetermined destiny. There is only one truth: you are receiving. And what you experience does not come from some external force. It is amplified from what you have already transmitted within, whether you are aware of it or not. The world around you is not the source, but merely the mirror. The radio cannot blame the broadcaster for the song being too sad. It only needs to adjust. Likewise, your mind need not resent circumstances. It only needs to change the vibrational frequency. And that frequency is not determined by surface reasoning, but by the deepest emotional state within you. When you vibrate at the frequency of worry, you will receive images of chaos. When you vibrate at the frequency of peace, reality will soften into a quiet symphony. Your consciousness never stops broadcasting signals. Every thought, every belief, every fear, every hope, they are all waves. These waves move into space, not disappearing, but forming the blueprint of experience. If you think you are unworthy, that inner receiver will tune itself to lack. If you believe you are upheld by something greater, the receiver will begin to open pathways you never expected. The danger is that most people do not know where they have set the dial. They let this inner radio run automatically, broadcasting from old memories, inherited beliefs, unresolved wounds. And then they call what comes to them fate. But fate is not written in ink, it is written in frequency. And frequency is a choice. You do not need to understand all the laws of the universe to live a transformed life. You only need to learn how to listen to your inner signal. You only need to recognize when you are transmitting fear and when you are transmitting love. That difference is not in words, but in vibration. And vibration is the key. Look at nature. The bee does not need a map to find its way to the flower. The river does not need GPS to flow downhill. Everything lives in order because it does not resist its natural frequency. Humanity, carrying free consciousness, has learned to resist the very flow of life. Yet it is precisely because of this consciousness that you can deliberately return, adjust, and retune to the frequency of the sacred kingdom. If each morning when you wake, you spend just a few minutes in stillness to tune in, meaning you consciously choose the state you want to carry through the day, then the entire stream of events will begin to shift. You do not need to adjust the world. You only need to adjust the receiver within. This is why repeating affirmations is not merely a psychological exercise. When done correctly, it is how you reprogram the receiver so that instead of reacting unconsciously, you deliberately choose the broadcast you wish to hear. When you say, "I am guided by divine wisdom," and you say it in resonance, you are turning the dial to the frequency of guidance. And then the unusual begins to happen. A phone call at the right time, an idea appearing, a door opening. Not miracles, but synchronicities aligned with your signal. There is no need to strain to control reality. Reality does not need to be managed. It only needs to be understood. And when you understand that you are living as a receiver, you will begin to value each thought, each emotion, as the dial by which you are deliberately shaping your life. And you will stop resenting, stop blaming, stop demanding others to change. For you will know, once you change the frequency, the world will sing to your rhythm. You are not forced to live with an old preset dial. You can choose a new frequency, the frequency of healing, the frequency of joy, the frequency of forgiveness, the frequency of limitless creativity. And when you remain steadfast in that frequency, you no longer need to struggle to attain anything. You need only open and receive. Your consciousness has never been a fixed block. It is an energy stream that reflects, receives, and harmonizes. And when you realize you are the one operating this device, you will cease wandering in the dark. You will return to the dial, and day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment, you will choose the wave. This is the simplest, most powerful path to pray, not with words, but with presence. No need to cry out into the void, only to emit the right signal. The universe always listens, and it has but one principle. The frequency you transmit is the reality you live. There are two ways in which people usually pray. One is petition, the other is recognition. And between these two lies a difference as great as night and day. One arises from lack, fear, and the sense of not being enough. The other begins with union, faith, and deep gratitude. One believes that what is needed is still far away. The other knows that it is already present and only requires alignment with it. The first way of praying petition is the most common. It is the cry of pleading, the feeling that something outside oneself must change circumstances. In this state, the person praying is like one standing before a closed door, knocking endlessly with no answer. They believe that if they knock harder, if they repeat more often, if they plead fervently enough, God will be moved. But they do not realize it is the very belief that the door is closed that keeps them forever outside. The second way recognition is the silent declaration, I already have. No need to beg, no need to shout, only to recognize. In this state, the one who prays is not standing outside asking, but becomes a part of what they are praying for. They no longer feel lack, for they are united with the source of abundance. They do not wait for a miracle from outside, for they are already shining from within. This is not a denial of practical needs. You may still need food, work, healing, or guidance, but what changes is the inner attitude with which you approach it. If you see yourself as empty, you will broadcast the signal of lack, and what you receive will match that frequency. If you see yourself as opening to receive, you broadcast the signal of readiness, and all that you need will begin to move toward you, not through striving, but through resonance. Petition is the voice of one who has forgotten they were born out of wholeness. It is the whisper of the mind that says, I am not enough. I need someone outside me to make me enough. And it is precisely that belief which freezes the flow. The more one begs, the less they receive, because their inner state is sending the message, I am outside the field of grace. In contrast, recognition is the voice of one who remembers their true nature. It is the affirmation, not of words, but of presence. I am inseparable from the source. From there they do not need to take, but allow goodness to flow naturally. They do not need to prove worthiness, for they live as if they are already blessed. And something extraordinary happens. The universe treats them as rightful heirs of light. Some may ask, if I am suffering, sick, or lacking, how can I recognize that I am already enough? How can I declare something not yet visible as already present? The answer is this, because that is the only way it can become real. You do not affirm to deceive yourself. You affirm to create the vibrational pattern that reality must fill. You are not lying. You are speaking from a deeper layer where truth has not yet been distorted by circumstance. Think of an artist painting a joyful face. When the first stroke touches the paper, that face does not yet exist. But in the artist's mind, the image is already complete. And because they have recognized it in the unseen, they can bring it forth into form. Prayer by recognition works the same way. You see what you pray for, not with eyes, but with faith. You feel it as already present, and then it finds its way into manifestation through people, situations, intuition, opportunities. Petition looks up to a distant God. Recognition looks inward to the indwelling God. One is pleading, the other is harmonizing. One is the state of separation, the other is the experience of union. And there is no way to unite with what you believe is missing. Only when you know you have always had, it truly becomes yours. This is why the most powerful prayer needs no more already answered. Sometimes it is only a silent moment. All that you need is all doubt and feel yourself you cling to it. No explanations needed, the natural no detailed requests. Prayer is not about making the state where you know that everything you need already is back into the right finding its way to you. Do not repeat your request 10 times a day, at the right time, as if submitting an application waiting for approval. Then the right thing arrives. Send it once in union and you will realize you were never lacking, as if that prayer has already been received. There was once a merchant who lived in a wealthy region, yet struggled every step carried the energy. He had goods, skills, and connections, but his profits were always meager, and every effort was obstructed by unexpected setbacks. Sometimes customers cancelled orders, sometimes transportation failed, sometimes costs suddenly arose, as though an invisible hand was holding him in a cycle of failure. One day, in the midst of a severe financial crisis, he happened to hear a simple phrase, "The outer world is only a reflection of the inner world," and like a bell sounding in the middle of the night, he stopped. He began to ask himself, if this is true, then what was he carrying within that caused everything outside to repeat in this way? He sat in front of a mirror, looking into his own eyes for the first time as though looking at a stranger, and in the long silence something became clear. Throughout all these years, he had never truly believed that he was worthy of prosperity. He always felt that he had to struggle to earn permission to succeed. Deep inside, there was a hidden belief that wealth was difficult, that only a chosen few could attain it, that if he achieved it too easily, it might be quickly taken away. The mirror does not reflect circumstances. It reflects belief, and so does life. From that moment, the merchant began the journey of reprogramming his mind, no longer trying to change the outside, but changing from within through awareness, through emotion, through the language he used with himself. Every morning, he stood before the mirror, not to adjust his appearance, but to adjust the frequency of his thoughts. He looked directly into his own eyes and affirmed, "I am a channel of abundance. All good things are finding their way to me easily and continuously." At first, he spoke mechanically, without emotion, but day by day, his inner voice began to carry life. Each repeated word began to vibrate. And then something strange occurred. Everything around him began to shift. Orders arrived without his pushing. Opportunities that seemed lost returned. Relationships suddenly became supportive. Nothing spectacular happened like in fairy tales, but the current had changed direction. The only thing that changed was that he no longer looked into the mirror with doubt. He looked and believed. He was no longer speaking to a shadow, but to a reality that was forming, and that reality was answering. The subconscious is not a judge. It does not care who you are, where you come from, how many degrees you hold, or what your past looks like. It only does one thing: receives the images you feed it and turns them into experience. If you feed it the image of a victim, it will make you suffer again and again. If you feed it the image of an air of light, it will open the way for you to step through great doors, not because you begged, but because you aligned. That merchant no longer needed anyone to bless him, because he had learned to bless himself with thought, with words, with daily faith. He did not need anyone to grant him wealth, because he had unlocked that flow from within. And that was the lesson. When you change the way you look into the mirror reflects a different person. You do not need to sit before a mirror to do this. Every time you silently look deep within, every time you release criticism and replace it with sacred recognition, you are reprogramming the subconscious. Do not measure the result by speed. Measure it by stability. For what comes from the subconscious will remain. It is not a temporary flare, but a structural change. If you are still telling yourself, "I am not good enough. I cannot change. I am not worthy of love," know that these are not truths, they are old programs, and you can erase them, right now, by writing a new one. No need to erase memory, only to shift the center of belief. For where you place focus, there it expands. You can begin with simple yet powerful affirmations. I am the expression of divine order. I allow prosperity to flow through me like an endless river. I am loved, supported, and guided in every step I take. Each of these is like a new code, overwriting the old program. Not by force of will, but by repetition and emotional integration. That merchant did not only change his finances, he changed the way he walked, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself in a room. For one who knows who they are has no need to prove, and one who knows they are the embodiment of light no longer fears the dark. The mirror cannot lie, and neither can the subconscious. It will always faithfully reflect what you believe to be true about yourself. If you want the world to change the image you feed it each day. You do not need perfection. You only need honesty and consistency. For a clear image, nourished by loving emotion, will always triumph over any circumstance. The world is not against you. It is simply agreeing with the frequency you are broadcasting, and you can change that frequency right here with a new choice in mind. Look into the mirror, not to inspect, but to remember who you are, what you are creating, and that you have always had the power to choose again at any moment. A royal child, lost while still in the cradle, grows up in a poor village, never knowing their true lineage. Each day, they gather firewood, carry water, living amidst the worries of survival and the sighs of those around them. They have never stepped foot in a palace, never held a scepter, never heard anyone say they are the child of a king, yet that truth does not vanish simply because they forgot. The human mind is the same. How long has it been since you forgot that you are part of a sacred universe? How long have you lived as though abandoned in a vast world, struggling daily with helplessness, lack, loneliness, and fear? Not because you were punished, but because you temporarily forgot your roots. You are the child of the king, yet live as an orphan not because you were forsaken, but because you disconnected from the sacred bloodline flowing within you. Every time you believe you are unworthy, that you must struggle endlessly to be loved, that you are not good enough to receive miracles, you are severing an invisible yet powerful lifeline to the source. Every religion, every true teaching, every word of the great spiritual masters points to one thing: you are never separated from God. But if you forget, you live as though you were never gifted. And it is that forgetfulness which is the source of all suffering. Not circumstances, not people, not karma, but the loss of awareness of your own holiness. Imagine someone who carries royal blood, yet begs for scraps of recognition from others. A soul born of light, yet searching for its value through the gaze of the outside world. A being capable of creating reality, yet driven by fear and old habits. To forget who you are, that is humanity's deepest tragedy. And it is also why so many remain trapped in cycles of insecurity and doubt. For when you believe you are only this body, only this personal history, only these mistakes you once made, then you live confined within molds others have placed upon you. The outer world is skilled at making you forget. Forget that you do not need to compete to have worth. Forget that you do not need to be perfect to be loved. Forget that this life has not come to punish, but to remind you of the truth that you are an inseparable part of a cosmic order flowing with love and wisdom. Yet each time you return inward, listening to the gentle call from within, you are tracing the path of a buried light. And then the miracle occurs. You need not do anything grand. You need not receive anyone's recognition, and yet you begin to feel different, lighter, clearer. Everything around you may seem unchanged, but the way you interact with it has been transformed. For you no longer live as someone lacking, but as someone remembering. There are no conditions required for you to be allowed to live in that connection. It does not come when you are good enough. It is always there, waiting for you to stop resisting. A lost child does not need to learn how to be a prince, they only need to be received again. And so it is with you. No need to prove, no need to carry double burdens, only to recognize and let that recognition become the new center of your thoughts, your words, your daily choices. From there, every cell, every decision, every action will begin to bear the mark of an awakened being, no longer wandering, no longer begging, no longer ashamed. You cannot pretend to be the child of the King, for it is not something to memorize, but something to live. If you want the world to change, begin by stopping, breathing deeply, and asking a simple question: if I truly am part of the divine order, what would I think now? How would I act? What would I choose? By asking this question often enough, you begin to step into a new field of awareness where everything is seen through the lens of truth. The cosmic memory is never lost. It is only covered by the dust of forgetfulness. But the inner light never goes out. It only needs a crack in the wall of fear to shine again. You are not the one searching for the light. You are the light. You are not the beggar of love. You are the very expression of that love. Everything else is only temporary mist. Let that mist dissolve, and you will realize there has never been separation. There has never been orphanhood, only forgetting. And now is the time to remember. Sarah was an ordinary woman with a stable job, a comfortable home, and conditions many would envy. Yet deep within, she felt empty. Nothing was overtly wrong, but nothing truly felt right either. Each morning when she woke, she stepped out of bed as though carrying an invisible stone. Life continued, but life itself no longer flowed within her. She had tried therapy, medication, meditation, self-help books, forced positive thinking, keeping herself busy, but the depression did not retreat. It was not merely an emotional state, but a calling, a subtle signal from the soul saying, "You have forgotten who you are, and nothing outside can fill that void." For many, depression is not a sign of breakdown. It is an invitation to enter a depth never before explored. It does not come to destroy, but to shatter the old mold we have confined ourselves within. It begins with sorrow, but if one is brave enough to go to the end, there opens a sacred landscape, the landscape of awakening. Sarah once believed her value was defined by what she achieved, completing her work, caring for her family, being kind, accomplishing milestones. But when all of that still failed to make her feel alive, she began to look in a different direction. She no longer ran outward. She began turning inward. She did not search for light, but simply allowed herself to stop within the darkness. She did not try to escape, did not try to fix. She simply remained present, a little more each day, and it was precisely in the stillness of sitting with the pain, without judgment, without resistance, that she began to realize there was a part of her that had never been depressed, a part unmoving, quiet, and luminous. That part had never been wounded, never disordered. It needed no reason to exist. It simply was. As Sarah began to recognize that presence, the emptiness gradually lost its power, because now she was no longer the victim of emotion, but the observer, no longer identified with her moods, but standing from a deeper, quieter place, able to see, I have sadness, but I am not the sadness. It was that separation, that awakening that marked the beginning of true healing, not the eradication of depression, but the decoding of its message. And the message was often simple, though buried beneath the noise of the mind. You have strayed too far from your sacred essence. Sarah did not need to force happiness. She needed to remember the wholeness that had always been there. Her depression was not her enemy, but a warning bell, telling her she had been living out of rhythm with her soul. And as she began to retune her frequency, not through action, but through co-presence with life, everything began to shift. She sat in silence, expecting nothing, hoping for no instant transformation, simply agreeing to be present with herself, unconditionally. In that space, life's most miraculous unfolding began to sprout. She felt a warmth arise from deep within, not from the outside, not from anyone, but from a source that had always been there, waiting for her to open to it. And then she began to write, not to share, but to remember. Each line she wrote was a reminder. I am returning, returning to herself, returning to the awareness that her presence was complete, requiring no proof. In the days that followed, depression did not vanish entirely, but it no longer dominated. For now, Sarah had reclaimed the sovereignty of her awareness. In every person's journey, there will come a time when the soul is veiled by the clouds of sadness, despair, and meaninglessness. But remember this, the clouds are not the sky. They are only temporary cover, and no matter how dense they become, behind them the sun is always shining. Depression may be the most sacred reminder the soul ever sends. It does not need to be eliminated, but listened to with full presence. For in the moment you stop resisting, stop striving to heal, and simply allow yourself to be, you have already begun the true resurrection. Sarah was not saved by someone else. She remembered on her own, and that remembering was the pivotal shift, from victim to sovereign, from lost to awakened. If you are walking through the dark, know that it is not wrong. It does not mean you are weak. It only means your soul is calling for transformation. Do not rush yourself into joy. Do not pretend to be fine. But also do not identify yourself with the pain. You may feel pain, but you are not the pain. You are the one who is aware. And that awareness is the light gradually breaking forth within you. Maria once believed that prayer only had effect when it came from the one who was suffering. She thought that if someone did not believe, if someone did not pray, then there was nothing she could do. But one day, that belief changed forever. Her youngest daughter, Clara, fell into a prolonged state of silence after a family trauma. The little girl no longer laughed, no longer spoke to anyone. No therapy brought progress. Doctors called it post-traumatic stress disorder. All Maria could do was watch her daughter sit for hours by the window, her eyes vacant as though her soul had withdrawn from the world. With no words left to speak, no reasoning left to analyze, Maria had only one thing to hold on to: prayer. But this time, she did not beg. She did not plead. She did not tell God to heal Clara. Instead, she began to do something else. She envisioned Clara whole, not hoping her daughter would get better, but seeing in the present moment that Clara was already complete. Every morning before going to the hospital, Maria sat in a quiet room. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and imagined Clara laughing brightly, running in the fields, calling, "Mom," with a clear, sweet voice. She did not pretend. She did not try to convince herself. She simply placed the fullness of her awareness into that image, as if it was already part of reality. And most importantly, she did it in gratitude. Not "will be healed," but already healed. Her frequency was no longer that of begging, but of recognition, no longer pleading from a low place, but agreeing with truth from a higher dimension. For on the deeper level of reality where consciousness and energy are one, every whole thought has power to radiate. Each time Maria held Clara's wholeness in her mind, she was transmitting waves of energy into the invisible field where all potential resides. She was not sending anything to her daughter, but connecting with the highest level of Clara's own awareness, where there was no trauma, where Clara had always been intact, even before the pain began. And then something strange began to happen. Not a dramatic breakthrough, but a gentle process. Clara began to look at her mother. Her eyes grew less vacant. Then one day, she whispered, "Mom, today there are birds flying outside the window." Maria did not cry, did not shout with joy. She simply nodded and silently gave thanks, because she knew the healing had already begun from within, where two streams of consciousness met in the stillness of God. When we pray for others, we are not performing a miracle. We are aligning the frequency of our own awareness with a higher truth. And in that alignment, we open a door for the other person to step through, not by force, not by replacing free will, but as an energetic gift that I see you not as the world sees you, but as God sees you. The strongest prayer does not need words. It is vibration, the merging of the mind of the one who prays with the image of perfection in the one being prayed for. Maria did not need Clara to believe in anything. She only needed to hold the image of wholeness without wavering. And that unwavering became the strongest signal in the universe. Imagine every prayer as a wave. If that wave carries doubt, fear, or control, it will quickly dissolve into the field of chaos. But if it is generated by gratitude, by deep trust that all is already right, it will resonate with the highest frequency of reality where healing is not an action, but a nature. Praying for another is not about taking responsibility away from them. It is about supporting them with recognition that is unconditional and without judgment. It is about standing in the light while they are still in the dark, not shouting, not dragging them out, just shining so they can remember the way home. Maria had never studied any class on spiritual healing, but through the heart of a mother, She touched a profound truth. Consciousness is energy, and energy can radiate. When you remain steadfast in light, others will gradually adjust their steps to that light. Not because you persuaded them, but because you became living proof of a higher reality. Maria's story is not a miracle tale. It is a testament that when one person's consciousness is elevated, it can serve as a foundation for another's transformation, not through specific actions, but through whole presence. And that presence begins where you no longer see the other as a victim, but as a soul temporarily forgetting who they are. When you look at them through the eyes of God without judgment, without labels, without fear, you are stirring the sacred memory within them, where their untouchable essence has always existed. Maria did not save Clara. She awakened herself, and from that awakening created a field that allowed Clara to remember who she was. Each time you pray for another, remember you are not trying to change them, you are choosing to stand firm in the recognition that they have never lost their wholeness. And that, more than any words, is the most powerful way to love. There was once a teacher who had stood in the classroom for over 20 years, yet had never encountered a student who unsettled her heart as much as that boy. His name was David, a rebellious child, often fighting, never completing his assignments. His eyes always carried an air of defiance, as though nothing in the world was worth his concern. Other teachers had already given up. His records were filled with harsh remarks. People called him a problem, hopeless, even the refuse of the education system. But this teacher did something different. She did not look at his behavior. She did not look at his grades. She looked at the person. She chose to believe that behind the rough shell, beneath the dirt of anger and resistance, there was an uncut diamond. It was not blind faith. It was recognition. For in the depths of every soul, whether a wayward child or a saint, there is always a divine spark, untouchable by behavior, circumstances, or past. The question is never whether the diamond exists, but whether anyone still has enough faith to see it. And this teacher, day after day, quietly held that vision. She did not try to fix David. She did not teach him as though he were lacking. Each time she met him, she sent a consistent signal. I know who you are. I see what even you have not yet seen about yourself. Whether he was sullen or defiant, her gaze never changed. It was not the gaze of pity, but the gaze of one who perceives value yet to be revealed. One day, after class, David stayed behind. No one asked him. He chose it himself. He walked to her desk and asked, "Do you really believe in me?" That question was the echo of a heart long obscured by judgment. She nodded without explaining, without proving. For true love needs no reason, and true recognition does not come from grades. From that day on, everything began to change. Not because the teacher had taught a miraculous lesson, but because the frequency of her awareness had melted the mud encasing that diamond. When one chooses to see with light, they ignite light in another, not through words, but through presence. David's story is not just a story of education. It is a metaphor for a sacred law. Each time you hold the image of wholeness for someone in your mind, no matter how they appear, you are helping to invite them back to themselves. Not through power, but through love. Not through control, but through deep recognition that the soul can never be broken, it can only be forgotten. In life you will meet many who are hard to love, those who are irritable, chaotic, quick to anger, or who hurt others. But if you see them only through their surface actions, you will react, and that only adds more mud. But if you pause, grow still, and choose to see deeper, you will notice the jewels buried beneath. And when you see them, you create a space for them to begin to see again too. No one comes into this life to be cast aside. No soul is born without radiant potential, but many have forgotten. They were taught that they were not good enough, not worthy, not valuable. And when they heard that often enough, they began to believe it. They began to act as if that lie were the truth. But truth is never altered by mistaken belief. Truth remains waiting for someone still enough to see. You may be that person. You need no qualifications, no eloquence, only a heart quiet enough not to be pulled into reaction, a mind spacious enough to hold someone in the state of not yet being themselves without losing sight of their sacred image. That teacher did not save David. She did nothing miraculous. But by holding steadfast in awareness, she became a clear mirror, reflecting back to him a different image of himself. And when David saw that image clearer and truer than what the world had ever told him, he began to change. And in that way, the teacher fulfilled the holiest mission of a soul, to awaken light in another through the light of her own being. And so can you, whether as a parent, a lover, a friend, or simply a stranger passing briefly through someone's life. You have the opportunity to do the same, by pausing, by not judging, by not labeling, by simply looking, truly looking into the deepest part of them and holding that image steadfast in your heart. That is how you help another find their way home. When a person realizes their divine nature, their inner world begins to change. But true transformation only begins when that person lives out what they have realized. For awareness without action is only knowledge. It is only when you begin to live as a divine soul, temporarily dwelling in a body in every thought, every word, every action, that the inner light truly becomes the guiding light of your life and radiates outward. To live as a divine being does not mean withdrawing from life. On the contrary, it means living more deeply, more awake, and more devoted in service. Not service through weary sacrifice, but through joyful offering. Because when you are aware that you are the flow of divine life, you no longer see service as a duty, but as an honor. You do not need to become a minister, a lecturer, or a spiritual leader to live a life of service. You can be a mother washing dishes in gratitude, a worker repairing a road with the awareness that each brick laid allows people to walk safely, a shopkeeper listening to a customer with full presence. Every small action, when done with divine awareness, becomes a ritual, and the world is uplifted through such invisible rituals. The practice of living as a divine being does not begin with changing external circumstances.